not as their own end goal, but errors as an entry point for making the brain more plastic. And if you think about it, it really makes sense. Why would the brain change at all if it's performing everything perfectly? When you make errors, well, in the immediate seconds and minutes after those errors, you are in a better position to learn.
성공을 위한 채널. 우리는 무언가를 배울 때 실수를 많이 하게 됩니다. 그리고 실수를 하게 되면 소극적이고 좌절하게 되죠. 하지만 실수가 우리에게 많은 도움이 되는 걸 아셨나요? 앤드류 후버만 교수는 이야기해줍니다. 실수를 하면 배움에 있어 큰 도움이 된다고 말이죠. 그럼 왜 실수가 우리에게 도움이 되고 목표 설정은 어떻게 해야 하는지 알아봅시다.
Neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to change in response to experience. In fact, neuroplasticity underlies all forms of learning, whether or not it's language learning or learning music or math or a physical skill. All forms of learning involve the reorganization of connections in the nervous system, the brain and spinal cord and body. One of the key principles of neuroplasticity is this notion of making errors as a good thing toward neuroplasticity. This is a little bit counterintuitive, but what the scientific literature tells us is that whenever we're trying to learn something new, if we make an error, we know it feels frustrating, but that state of frustration actually cues up particular brain areas to be more alert so that on subsequent attempts to learn that thing, we have a heightened level of focus and a higher probability of learning the new skill, regardless of what that skill is. And I've talked about this before in various episodes as encouraging people to embrace errors or pursue errors, not as their own end goal, but errors as an entry point for making the brain more plastic. And if you think about it, it really makes sense. Why would the brain change at all if it's performing everything perfectly? When you make errors, well, in the immediate seconds and minutes after those errors, you are in a better position to learn. And the paper is entitled The 85% Rule for Optimal Learning. Basically, what this paper shows is that when trying to learn something new, you want to make the difficulty of what you're trying to learn such that you're getting things right about 85% of the time, that you're making errors about 15% of the time. And the reason I like this paper is it really points specifically to some protocols that we can implement, because people always say, okay, you want to set a high goal, you want to try and achieve something that's really lofty, but you don't want to make the goal so lofty that you don't make any progress at all. Other people say you really want to start with really small goals and make things very, very incremental. Only set out to do things that you know you can accomplish, and that will feed back on your self-esteem and all these positive feedback loops. And then, layer by layer, you'll eventually get where you want to go. Well, it turns out that neither is true. You need to set the level of difficulty such that you're making errors about 15% of the time. And I want to emphasize about 15% of the time, because there's no way to configure protocols for sport or language or math or anything else where you're going to have exactly 15% of errors. But it really points to the idea of making things pretty hard, but not so hard that you're failing every attempt or even half of the attempts. Failing about 15% of the time seems optimal for learning.
우리가 배움에 있어 목표 설정을 할 때 기준은 너무 어렵지도 너무 쉽지도 않은 목표를 설정해야 합니다. 조금의 실수는 뇌를 유연하게 해주고 배움에 있어 최적의 상태를 만들어줍니다. 그렇게 빠르게 배워서 자신의 성공에 도움을 주세요. 당신의 실수가 더 빠른 성공의 길로 만들어줄 겁니다. 재미있게 보셨다면 구독과 좋아요 부탁드려요.